On January 20th at high noon at the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., Donald J. Trump will be inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. Love him or hate him, he has become the symbol of America's collective unconscious, an embodiment of the tension, transformation, and revolution surging through the political veins of this nation. In his unfinished novel, The Last Tycoon, F. Scott Fitzgerald famously wrote, "There are no second acts in American life." Perhaps the unfinished novel of America is about to be rewritten. Will this be a new beginning or the final chapter? A provocative question indeed. Welcome everyone into this special presidential edition of The Lab. I'm Daljeet Peterson, and really excited about this video that I'm going to share with you today. It's a really interesting topic. We're going to take a look at the astrology of the 47th presidency. As I said, Trump's second act. And, as I was thinking of potential titles for this video, the idea of, Trump's second act was kind of obvious. And that immediately made me think of that famous quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is from his unfinished novel, The Last Tycoon, and super appropriate, I think, for a president like Trump, who kind of is a tycoon-like figure in many ways. But that famous quote that there are no second acts in the American life. And this has often been paraphrased to say there are no second acts in American politics. Yet here we have a second act for Donald Trump. And in many ways, this is a guy who has consistently defied conventional wisdom, right? This is a guy who was not supposed to win in 2016, was not supposed to have a political career. It was over, and here he is. So seems appropriate that we can look at this chart. Now, what I should be clear about is that this is not a chart of Donald Trump. This is not his personal horoscope. This is not a transit chart for Donald Trump. This is a chart of the administration itself, this 47th presidency, right? So this is something we would call like mundane astrology, right? We're using astrology to cast a chart for an entity, in this case, right? An administration, right? But it has anything that starts under the conditions or the tone of the times, right? It is imbued with the spirit, with the quality of this time. So this administration, beginning as it will on January 20th, has this imprint, this blueprint, right, that will tell us about the quality and the character of the administration. Now, something interesting to point out about this fact, that regardless of who won the election, whether it was Trump or Harris, they both would have the same chart for the administration because it's imprinted with the quality of this time. Now, it's not to say that they would use those energies in the same way. They clearly would not. But some of the themes would be present, would be demonstrated regardless of who won. But the fact, Trump did win, and I think the reason he did win is because of this energy that we are moving through on the planet at this time. And as we're going to see in the chart, I'm going to show you, there is an unprecedented aspect taking place that appears in this chart, that it hasn't been present on the Earth since 1780. The last time we saw this conjunction, spoiler alert, it involves Pluto, right, was in January 20th, 1780. Keep in mind that's 9 years before George Washington was inaugurated as our first president. 4 years into the Revolutionary War, the American Revolution, the beginning of a very revolutionary era. 8 or 9 years later, we've had the French Revolution. So this sort of revolutionary fervor is in the air. It's baked into the quality of this time. Now, am I saying we're going to have a revolution? No. But could we? Yes, right? It's constellated. This is, if we look at these cyclical patterns, these are the kinds of things that tend to happen under these conditions. So that's kind of the caveat, and it's interesting and it's fascinating to look at. So we're going to see what it is about this chart that has this quality, this revolutionary, unprecedented quality to it. And so what are we doing? We're casting a chart for the administration itself. And the reason we can do that is because we have a date, a time, and a place where this thing, this administration, is going to begin, right? January 20th, high noon, Washington, D.C. So the chart is saying, here this thing is beginning, here is the quality of the time it is being inaugurated into, and here's what we can expect, the tone, the character of this administration to have based on this astrology. So buckle up, this is really going to be interesting. I think you'll be fascinated by what we're going to explore here, and I'm really happy to share it with you. So let's jump in without further ado and look at Trump's second act, the astrology of the 47th presidency. And something that we're going to learn as we explored this chart is there are a lot of shadow qualities to this chart. As I was creating the graphic here, having some fun with putting Musk as sort of the shadow behind Trump, and this seems very appropriate. This is rather unprecedented. I don't think we've ever had a president whose ally is the richest man in the world. So maybe Elon Musk is actually the last tycoon. Who knows? But these guys make very interesting bedfellows, to say the least. And many have argued that Elon Musk is the shadow president. I've even seen memes of him as the shadow emperor, Emperor Musk. I hope he takes those kinds of things good-heartedly. This guy is a meme master, if you will. I would argue that he is a master magician in many ways. And I don't use that term lightly. And I don't know, is he a black magician? Is he a white magician? Memes are magic, rockets are magic, communication technology, all technology is magic. And this guy is a master manipulator of media and tech and of culture. There's something really fascinating about this presidency just with that alone, but let's move on. But we're going to see Musk is going to show up in this chart, as I will demonstrate for you. But first, I want to just draw your attention to the chart itself. So here we have it, January 20th, 2025, 12 p.m., Washington, D.C. So what happens? The sun will always be at 0 degrees of Aquarius on January 20th every year. Also, the midheaven will always be at 26 degrees of Capricorn. Using a whole house system, that's going to fall in the whole house 9th, not in the 10th, where the sun is, which creates an interesting quality to each of these administrations. The other thing that is consistent is it's always going to have a Taurus rising, right? So this gives a certain quality of sort of projecting this stable image. The sun in the 10th in Aquarius shows, this very progressive, forward-thinking, for the people kind of quality to it, while the North Node is pointing to something, a little bit of a hidden symbol, where this Capricorn is always going to show us the real sort of moral compass, if you will, of every administration, which is much more traditional, holding on to old values, and has a different sort of quality than Aquarius. Now, I want to take a closer look at what's going on here on the midheaven, because this is really the most important symbol in the chart, because that sun always represents the ruler, the leader. Here we have the inauguration of the new commander-in-chief being coronated. It's a 4-year coronation to become the symbolic leader of the nation. And so it's very appropriate that it happen at high noon in the most important part of the chart in the 0 degree, right? So there's the midheaven at 26. This is invariably going to happen on every inauguration, right? We see here the rising sign is always in Taurus and invariably around 14 degrees rising. This is consistent in every chart. And I'll demonstrate that for you. If we look back 4 years ago at Biden's inauguration on January 20th, 2021, what do we see? Sun, 0 degrees Aquarius, midheaven, 26 degrees Capricorn, ascendant, 14 degrees Taurus. Go back 4 more years to Trump's first presidency, 2017 inauguration. Sun, 0 Aquarius, we've got 26 Cap, we've got 14 Taurus. Go back to Obama, 2009 inauguration. 0 Aquarius, 26 Cap, 14 Taurus. Go back to 2001, Bush's first term. 0 Aquarius, 26 Cap. And here we see, 13 degrees, 55 minutes Taurus. So it can go anywhere from 13, 14. Invariably, though, it's right around those 2 degrees. Now, that's where the similarities end. So we have these 3 factors that are consistent, and then everything else changes. And so what's interesting is what is aspecting those key factors. If we think about those as the backbone, the spine of every American administration, it has this consistent image, this consistent projection that it projects into the world. It says, oh, this is a Taurus rising administration. It has this certain stability. It's reliable. It's focused on resources. It has a very Aquarian leader who is forward-thinking and progressive and is for the people. Yet it has this Capricorn midheaven that says we are going to hold on to our traditional values and we are going to be the leaders in the world. Very interesting to consider those factors. And man, as I was putting this presentation together, I was like, wow, what a chart for that Bush administration. I'd never cast this chart before. Back in the early 2000s, I was just beginning my astrology career. And so I don't think I've ever seen this chart. And it is amazing, actually. It's got this kite pattern, aggressive Mars opposing the ascendant, Pluto and Sag, conjunct the moon, which became all about, as we know about that period, a radical fundamentalism. This is a entire separate video, but something to be really fascinated by. Maybe I'll do a series of videos on all these inaugurations. It would be fun to examine them. If that's something you want to see on this channel, leave me a comment in the comments below and let me know. I love doing this stuff, so I'd love to do it. But anyway, this chart is very different from obviously Obama's chart in 2009, right? You had this massive Aquarius stellium. And I want to point your attention to the fact that Mercury was exact conjunct the Sun and very close was Jupiter. So talk about this, probably one of the best communicating presidents we've had. This guy was a really good, eloquent speaker who spoke of vision, spoke of hope. That was his whole campaign. You couldn't get a more perfect symbol of that than the Sun with Mercury and Jupiter, the sign of hope, the sign of progress, the sign of expansion, very well articulated for the people. This was the character of that administration. If we look at the first Trump administration, here we say nothing is aspecting the Sun at all. Makes no aspect to any other planet, right? So we would look to other places in the chart. We would see Uranus in Aries, for instance, in the 12th house opposing Jupiter. The other thing we'll start to look at anytime you see oppositions, it's like, okay, where are the challenges? Where is this administration going to be challenged or threatened? You have the moon in opposition to the ascendant here, right? So these were factors that we could look at in understanding the tone of the first administration. Likewise with Biden's, like we see here, we had Saturn closely conjunct the Sun, which would indicate limits and setbacks and frustration. Also, Saturn is the symbol of the old and the elderly in many ways. So this administration was going to have a very somber, challenging aspect to it. Right? And it's always easy to look back, right? We can Monday morning quarterback this, but that was opposing the part of fortune. It was in a square to the ascendant. So the Saturn sitting up here in the 10th house with the Sun really was this somber, heavier, darker, older, mature. I'm the mature candidate. I'm going to help course correct. I'm going to get us through the pandemic at the time. I'm the one that can defeat Trump. I'm the more senior, experienced, wise elder. This is very much what I think America elected in 2020, but it also had its downside. It showed sort of the weakness, the age, the fragility of this presidency. This was a very much a Saturn conjunct Sun kind of president. And so I point that out because the contrast there with this administration, this 2025 inauguration for Trump's second term, completely different. And this is the most important factor in this chart. Is what I want to spend a good portion of this video unpacking for you, because this is showing us something very, very significant. Pluto is almost exact conjunct this Aquarius sun, right? So take a closer look at that. What are we looking at? What are we getting when we get this constellation? Totally different than Saturn. Pluto's energy is transformative, it is powerful, it is secretive often, it operates in the shadows, behind the scenes. It is this almost volcanic, eruptive. You could not get a more potent power symbol than this Pluto with the sun in Aquarius in the 10th house. This is going to be the Pluto presidency. Expect something unexpected, transformational, revolutionary, a lot of upheaval. I'm going to show you some qualities here as we unpack this, but this is the character. This is where it's at. And again, look how different it is from 2016 when I said the sun was completely unaspected. Pluto was over in Capricorn, totally different era that we were in. Now we've got Pluto in Aquarius. The part of fortune is conjunct here, and I have my own suspicions about what this might mean. Does this mean that America will become fortunate, or will this administration become very rich? The question is whose fortune, right? This is the fortune of the administration, which is supposed to be the symbolic representation of the nation who elected this person. But I would argue because of the character of the president that we did elect, you can expect some of the much more shadow sides of this configuration to express itself. This is a guy who even stated, I'm going to act like a dictator on day one of my presidency. This is a guy who's going to grab the ring. He is going to take this Plutonian power and he's going to use it for good or for ill. And my guess is he's going to use it for his own fortune and the fortune of the wealthiest people that he is surrounding himself in his administration. You can definitely put Musk in that category. We've got Peter Thiel in that category. Zuckerberg has just, aligned himself with this administration. It's all here. Like, these are the Aquarian technocrats who are poised to take control of this country, take control of this government. So let's take a deeper look at what is that going to look like? What are the possible outcomes of this configuration? So, of course, we're talking about Aquarius here, right? And this is, as I said, this is consistent of every U.S. president since 1937. And it's interesting to note that's when the inauguration was moved from, it used to take place on April 4th every 4 years. And that makes it Pisces. The sun is in Pisces in April at that time. And the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, which was ratified in 1933, said, this has to take place sooner, right? Because they created something that was known as the lame duck presidency, where if the incumbent lost in the election, it was like these 3 months before the new president took over, and nothing got done during that time. So it was actually a constitutional amendment that said it has to take place between, I think, like 87 days or something. It didn't say specifically what day, but it had to take place in a certain window. And this day, January 20th, was chosen. And I think it's interesting to think that's 0 degrees Aquarius. There's something new. There's something sort of progressive. There's a hope. There's an optimism. There's a power there's a potency, really, to that Aquarius sun. And then I think, well, why was that? This was a conscious choice. Someone looked at this, and I think it's interesting to consider that it was during Roosevelt's presidency, right? And this guy was a 33rd degree Mason. Right? And the Masons are a group, an organization that is very steeped in esoteric knowledge. They would have definitely looked at the chart for this and said, this is the kind of symbolic representation we want of our American president. Because it's very interesting, if we think about Aquarius, the sun is actually in detriment in Aquarius. This is, the sun would rather be in Leo. And I think there's something really interesting about that, where by putting the sun in Aquarius, it's not about the man or the woman or the person, Leo. Aquarius is about being of service to the people. It's this much more humanitarian fellowship of man. It's a representation of the will of the people, Aquarius. So we have this as the quality of the leadership. It's always Aquarius, that sun, which is expressing this leadership, this authority. It's almost like the president becomes this sort of father figure. Heretofore, we've never had a female president yet, so we don't have a mother figure. And maybe this is why, I don't know. But the sun is that expression, this masculine, heroic individual who is going to demonstrate this leadership. But here's where it gets interesting. When we bring Pluto into the mix, this adds an entirely different character to this administration. Pluto conjunct the sun, it's just power. It's this primordial, compulsive upheaval. You think about a volcano erupting. That's the power of Pluto. It's very political. Pluto is a very political planet. You can have upheavals. It can be destructive and aggressive. It can be extreme. Pluto is all about underground, and it's actually traditionally associated with underground wealth. Anything that can be extracted as a resource, oil, gold. Mining is a very plutonic activity. And something to note, we talked about Musk earlier. We're going to talk about him a little more as we get deeper into this, but I couldn't help to, correlate where, he comes from a family of gem miners, right? Much of his wealth probably does originate from his father was a very wealthy gem miner in Africa. He's tried to distance himself from that, and he tries to, position himself as a self-made man. But, just like Trump, right? His daddy gave him a lot of money to start his real estate business. He didn't build it from scratch by himself. These people have generational wealth behind them. And it affects their mindset. So just an interesting sort of side note. I don't want to get too distracted from that, but this is kind of how my mind works. Can't help it. But yeah, Pluto. So what's going on with Pluto and the sun together? Well, let's take a look at what this might constellate. If we think about the sun as the symbol of leadership, identity, and purpose, and it's up in that 10th house, it's emphasizing the role of the presidency as the public face of authority and the focal point of the nation's ambitions and scrutiny. It's something to really consider here that it's the 10th house is the most public place in a chart. So it's quite appropriate that these inaugurations always take place at noon, when the sun is high in the sky, always going to be in the 10th house at noon. But then put Pluto there with it. What does this represent? Well, transformation, power, and control. What Pluto governs are hidden forces, secrets, and the undercurrents of influence that shape structures and outcomes. And really double down on that. Think about this power. I think these are going to be themes that we are going to look at, particularly this idea of hidden forces and secrets and the undercurrents of influence. And I think we're going to really be looking at who is influencing this presidency, because I will tell you, it's going to be Pluto. And again, this is happening now. What we're looking at is, this is the quality of the time. At the moment of this inauguration, Pluto and the sun sitting at the top of the chart, exact conjunct. This Pluto is influencing this presidency. It's unavoidable, right? Now, how the administration works with that energy is a different story, but either way, Pluto will have an impact on this presidency, for good or for ill, for better or for worse. We are going to see these plutonic themes demonstrated full stop. Like, it's going to be obvious. And of course, with Pluto, what's obvious is sometimes hidden. Sometimes it's in the shadows. Sometimes it reveals secrets. Sometimes it hides secrets. We're going to see a mix of both, I would predict. So just really interesting to consider this energy as informing this administration. So what can we expect when we have this conjunction, when these two energies are combined in this way? What are we going to look for? This administration is going to wield extraordinary power. As I said, Pluto is a symbol of power. And what are they going to be focusing on? Profound changes to societal structures. They've made no bones about their ambitions to drain the swamp, right? They're going to clear out what they call the deep state, right? They're going to replace it with their people. Profound changes. They're going to use this power They're going to wield it. This is a grab the ring kind of administration. They are not going to be shy about it, and they feel empowered. This Pluto placement is giving them a sense of being empowered to do the work they think they need to do, right? Whether or not we agree with that is another story, but this is what is constellated. This is the quality of the time. And if you think about these themes that Pluto suggests, this Pluto-Sun conjunction suggests themes of regeneration or destruction. So their policies and actions will either rebuild or they will destabilize established systems. And you might say, well, this is obvious, but I'm just pointing this out because this is why astrology is useful. It's saying these things are constellated and will correlate. What we want to now see is what can we expect? How do we then look at this, what unfolds over the next 4 years with this frame, with this astrological archetypal lens? And it's clear it's going to either rebuild or destabilize. And depending on what side of the political spectrum you're on, you probably are leaning one way or the other. And either way, this is going to be the case. This is either going to be a rebuilding or a destruction of the administration, the American government. The America that we know, I feel like, is being transformed before our very eyes. This is what I've been talking about more broadly when we talk about Pluto's transit into Aquarius, and that this is the birth of a new era. And so, like I said, you couldn't get a more potent symbol of it with this Pluto conjuncting the Sun in Aquarius for this inauguration chart. So keep your eyes on the bouncing ball. Another thing we can look at with Pluto is, and this is one of the things that I'm going to be looking at very closely, it has a penchant for secrecy, which is going to imply that much of this administration's workings are going to occur behind closed doors, and a heavy reliance on covert strategies and alliances. So it's going to be very hard to track. A lot of the machinations of this administration will likely be done in secret, hidden. Pluto, in the shadows, covert strategies and alliances. So that's the kind of tone we can expect for this administration, the Plutonic power administration. And something that I want to consider as we think about all of these hidden agendas, these secrecy behind closed doors, what's going on in the back rooms and what are the negotiations? This guy claims to be an amazing negotiator. But when I look at Pluto conjunct the Sun in this chart, I mean, I can't help to think about Elon Musk. This is the perfect symbol of Pluto conjunct the Sun in Aquarius in this chart. As much as Trump is a Plutonic president, he has Pluto with his ascendant on his Leo rising. But here we have the symbol of what I would call the plutocrat. And this is a word that is derived from the word Pluto, plutocrat. This is a word that is often used in a derogatory fashion, but for a person whose power derives from their wealth. That is the definition of Elon Musk. This is the richest man in the world who bought his influence on this president. And I would argue that Trump is a plutocrat as well. He has used his wealth to gain access to the corridors of power. So I would say if this is the Pluto presidency, this is a plutocratic administration. Expect those who have power to wield that power, Pluto. And I expect a lot of these qualities can be constellated during this administration. And again, it could be revolutionary and evolutionary. It could be the kind of change that needs to take place. We talk about life, death, and rebirth. Is this the death of the old America and the birth of a new America? Is this the natural evolution? Is this the use of this potent force in order to aggressively and powerfully change the nation? Whenever you have Pluto involved, there's always the chance of violence, which is a concern. I'm not going to lie. That's something that I'm deeply concerned about, is how this power will be used, right? The idea of the id, this is like the Freudian notion of the id, the ego, and the superego, like this just impulsive, irrational, unconscious desire to get what I want. I can't think of a more id-dominated president than Trump. It's just his character. Expect a lot of this Pluto energy to show up during this administration. Whether Musk stays in the foreground, whether he fades into the background, and there's a lot of speculation about whether, Trump will grow tired of Musk and will eventually cut him off like he does with many of his associates. Once his utility has served its purpose, he drops them and makes them a pariah. I don't expect that. I've looked at Musk's chart. Certainly for the next year, I don't see his power or influence waning. But we could see that he just kind of disappears into the background, but know that he's not gone because it's Pluto. It's in the shadows. It's behind closed doors. It's hidden. It's secret. We won't know what's really going on, right? So that's why we want to track these things. Why we want to have this lens so that we can really look at what is taking place. This idea of plutocracy and hidden powers. It raises the questions about the influence of wealth and elite interests in this administration. And again, this isn't news, right? If you look at the influence of Musk, you look at the influence of Peter Thiel, right, who backed Vance as the vice presidential candidate. He literally just has funded his entire career, right? Think about Zuckerberg, who has lined up and kind of got in line with the administration and its desires. You think about Rogan and that whole sphere of influence. They're all aligning with, these are all plutocratic, very wealthy people who have an outsized influence on what takes place in this administration. So we can expect a lot of plutocratic activities to take place in this administration. Now, because of that, there's going to be an intensified focus and criticism on these policies. People are going to be watching out for this. How is this affecting economic policies? The power of corporations is going to be front and center, and financial inequalities. But again, we're dealing with hidden powers, secret dealings, and this is going to be significant in this administration, right? And it's going to create, I feel, this aura of mystery and also suspicion. People are going to be deeply suspicious of the activities of this administration. And so it's not going to be without scrutiny. And the reason it won't be without scrutiny is because it is in the 10th house. Now, if this Pluto were in the 12th house or the 8th house or the 4th house of this chart, it would be a different story. Those are the shadowy, darker places where Pluto can work behind the scenes and do its sort of, secret magic. Because this is in the 10th house, this is the most public place in any chart. So these themes of authority and public accountability, that's the thing that I think we are going to probably see. This administration is going to face significant public scrutiny. People are going to be watching closely. How are they wielding that power and for what purposes? I think they will be held accountable by the media, by citizens. It's going to have to take place. You're not going to get a lot of public information, right? It's going to be the responsibility of the public to keep this administration accountable, which is why I think they are also very adamant about destroying the credibility of the media that would maybe hold them accountable, right? We are in uncharted waters here, folks. We have never seen anything like this. This is an entirely different political, social, cultural, economic atmosphere that we're in, environment. It is completely different. And this is the symbol of this massive change, this tectonic shift taking place in our culture. So that's why I share these things with you. So you're, forewarned is forearmed, as I like to say. So I want to look at a few of the potential outcomes that we can get from this aspect of Pluto and the Sun. Obviously, the number one, and in a positive way, is like, okay, it could constellate the idea of transformative leadership. I think it certainly will. What this administration has said that they want to do is they want to lead sweeping reforms. They want to tackle long-standing issues, and they will have a relentless drive for changes. And again, this is a super emboldened, empowered presidency. They are going to use this plutonic energy to accomplish their agenda. Whether you agree with their agenda or you disagree with their agenda, expect it to be sort of shoved down our throats. Like it's coming, and it's coming hard. What else do we get? Well, a concentration of power. And this is a big concern, right? Obviously, Pluto concentrates power. So this presidency could centralize its authority, which will draw both admiration and criticism for its approach to governance. And again, this is something that is informed. This is the background energy in which this election took place, right? This was an issue of, are we saving democracy? There's talks of, he has been characterized as a dictator, as a fascist, as someone, it's the end of democracy as we know it. And that's why this conversation has taken place, right? This is literally in the background frequency. This is the quality of the time we're moving through. There's a reason why it feels so dramatic, that this is a life or death battle for the future of America, right? Because of the symbolism, because of this cyclical influence that we are in, right? The energy, the frequency patterns that are present literally in the air, right? What's happening, as above, so below. That energy is being translated. There's a correlation to the intensity of these times. And this is just the perfect symbol. The world is watching and kind of waiting for what we're going to do as a nation under the guidance of this new administration, right? This new king, this new commander-in-chief, and all the influences that he's bringing into this administration, all this plutonic underworld. It's almost criminal, right? And I'm not saying, well, I am saying, and we are saying it, what just happened, right? This is the first president to come in as a convicted felon, right? It's like, you can't write this shit, right? Like, this is why, and Pluto is such an unconscious energy, right? It's the collective unconscious of the nation that is erupted during this time. And this is a reflection on it. We are seeing sort of the dark desires of the nation for change, for transformation. And, there's a lot of that, like, burn it to the ground. Like, there's a lot of that energy within sort of the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, right? That just, drain the swamp, burn it to the ground, start over, rebirth, regeneration. That's Pluto. That's the energy that is informing this administration, for good or for ill. It is just the reality of what we're seeing. There's a couple of outcomes. What's another outcome? Well, shadow and revelation, right? And I love thinking of Pluto in these terms, right? Because a lot of hidden agendas, and we probably will get some scandals over the course of the administration. It often forces what is hidden into the light. And I think that's what we're going to see as this administration will demonstrate. They are going to grab the power, that Pluto power. And they will try to do a lot of it in secret. But this is one of the things that Pluto often can reveal secrets that are hidden. At the same time as it has this secrecy, there's also a power of revelation in it. So this will require, though, others shining a light on the activities of this administration. So it's going to be this balance of power. How are they held accountable? Who's shining the light? Who's doing the investigative journalism? Who's looking behind the curtain, behind the closed doors, and trying to reveal what's really going on? That's going to be an important factor, and whether that actually, whether that gets demonstrated or not remains to be seen. But I expect a huge surge in that kind of investigative journalism, that the opposing team will try to hold them accountable. It's going to be very interesting when we get to the midterms 2 years into this administration. But that's a subject for another day. Hey everyone, just jumping in here for a quick second. I hope you're enjoying this video so far. I'm actually going to create an extended version of this video, an extended cut. I go into a lot more detail when I look at some of the oppositions in the chart. Where is the conflict going to be? We have a very strong opposition with Mars and the midheaven. We have the moon in Libra opposing Chiron. How is this going to affect the diplomacy efforts of this administration? We also have Venus conjunct Saturn in the 11th house in Pisces. I think this is going to tell us a lot about what we can expect with women's and reproductive rights and how these restrictions may cause a backlash, and how a lot of potentially grassroots efforts could be constellated by this chart and what that might mean for the administration. So there's a lot more detail that I go into. So I'm going to share this extended cut on my new Substack, which is called Mutable Fire. And it's a place where I'm going to try to aggregate all of my different forms of content, my writing, my videos, as well as some AMAs and some Q&As that I hope to host there. And also, I plan on offering some courses in the coming year. So I'm experimenting with that platform as a potential place where all of that can live together. And so I'll be starting to share some bonus content, some of these extended cuts. So I'll put a link in the description below to that Substack page. It's free to join, so you can just sign up and you'll get the newsletter, you'll get access to this bonus content. And yeah, kind of an effort to maybe build a little bit more of a community around Astrolab and the content that I'm creating. So I hope you'll join me over there. And yeah, let's get on to the end of the video. This is where I'm going to be focusing. How is this Pluto showing up in this presidency, in this chart? Because as an astrologer, it is unprecedented, it is historical, it is powerful, and it is transformational, for good or for ill. So that's Trump's second act. That's the astrology of the 2025 inauguration of this 47th presidency. And again, an unprecedented, perhaps shadow presidency, where the influence of the wealthiest people is going to be something to keep your eye on. If you're paying attention, this is where it's happening. We're not going to see it. It's going to be hidden behind closed doors, secretive, underground, possibly criminal. And I'm not saying they're criminals, but you know, Trump isn't a convicted felon. We have I think it's our first convicted felon who has been elected president. You can't write this shit, people. Like, this is where we are as a country, as a planet, as a civilization. Again, this is the power of astrology, to give us this perspective, to take this bird's eye view, this archetypal lens, and really assess. You know, it's like what they call a situational assessment. What's going on? What is in the air? What is the quality of this time? How are these things showing up, and what can we expect? Right? And if you want to participate, if you want to have a voice, if you want to try to move the narrative, right? If you want to have influence, you have to know the rules of the game, the rules of engagement with which, you know, that are sort of qualifying the playing field that we're moving into. So I hope you find that insightful. I think it's fascinating as shit. So I just can nerd out on this stuff all day. As always, if you like this content, you want to see more of it, if you like this and you want to see, like I said, if you want to see Trump's chart with Musk's chart, leave me a comment below. And if I get enough comments and enough people respond, I'll produce a couple of those videos as well as a follow-up to this, because it's really interesting. And I think, again, it's one of the best uses of this tool. So there you have it. It'll be interesting I can't wait to hear the speech on Monday, what the tone of that will be. Will we hear some of these symbolic gestures in the language of that speech? I would expect it, right? And that's what I love about astrology. And if you can have this tool set, you're going to listen with different ears. You're going to hear different things, reading between the lines. That's what, you know, it's showing us we need to do that. So, all right, that's it for now. Till next time, everyone. Sadhana.